When you dream about being happier in the future, you're probably imagining yourself being content with what you have. Maybe you picture a new house or a luxurious lifestyle. But what you're really imagining is being satisfied with those things. You're not just picturing wealth, you're picturing contentment. That's the feeling we're all chasing. But often, when reality doesn't live up to expectations, it's because the moment we get something new, we immediately start wanting whatever comes next. While researching and writing my book, I gained some fascinating insights into why chasing more often leads to less happiness. Today I want to walk you through 5 principles, 5 rules, that the happiest people I have ever encountered seem to live by almost instinctively. These aren't motivational platitudes. These are hard-won psychological truths, aligned remarkably well with one of the most enduring philosophical traditions in human history, Stoicism. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, were obsessed with this very question. Not, how do I get more, but how do I be more? How do I live well, regardless of what I have? Their answers, written centuries ago, are more urgent today than ever. And if you learn to live by these 5 rules, I promise you, not as a motivational speaker, but as someone who has studied the research, talked to the people, and thought deeply about this, you will find that you need far less money than you think to live a genuinely rich life. Let's get into it. The French novelist Marcel Proust once told a story about a young man who was completely consumed by the world of the rich and powerful. He was obsessed with aristocratic society, with the parties he hadn't been invited to, the estates he'd never walked through, the conversations happening in rooms he couldn't enter. He spent his mental energy gazing upward, always upward, at the glittering world just beyond his reach. And Proust, who understood obsession and longing better than almost any writer who ever lived, gave this young man an unusual piece of advice. He told him to go and study the work of the painter Jean-Siméon Chardin. Now, Chardin wasn't painting the wealthy and the powerful. He wasn't painting grand battles or mythological scenes or aristocratic portraits. Chardin painted the ordinary. He painted kitchen tables with a piece of bread and a ceramic jug. He painted a copper pot catching the afternoon light, a few peaches in a bowl, a woman scrubbing a pan, dead fish, cracked eggs, humble, unglamorous, everyday objects, rendered with such care, such attention, such love, that they became transcendent. The point Proust was making wasn't about art, it was about seeing. He wrote, "When you walk around a kitchen, you will say to yourself, 'This is interesting, this is grand, this is beautiful,' like a Chardin." The lesson was this: beauty is not reserved for the extraordinary. It is not something that arrives with enough money or enough success or enough recognition. It is already here, all around you, in the textures and rhythms of your daily life. But it requires a specific kind of attention to see it. This is pure Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled over one of the most powerful empires in history, a man who had access to every luxury the ancient world could offer, wrote in his private journal about the beauty of bread cracking in the oven, about the way a ripe fig splits open, about the expression on an old lion's face. This was not a man who lacked for material comfort, and yet he trained himself deliberately and consistently to find wonder in the small and the quotidian, because he understood something crucial. If you cannot appreciate what is already in front of you, acquiring more will not solve that problem. More will just give you more things to fail to appreciate. Think about your own life right now, not the life you're working toward, not the life you imagine having in 5 or 10 years. This life, right now. The morning coffee that you drink too fast because you're already thinking about what comes next. The conversation with a friend that you half listen to because your phone is in your hand. The meal you eat standing at the counter. The sunset you notice only long enough to take a photo of it. We are surrounded by Chardin paintings. We are surrounded by extraordinary, ordinary moments. But we have trained ourselves, through habit, through social media, through the relentless forward momentum of modern life, to look past all of it and fix our gaze on what we don't yet have. The first rule of psychological richness is devastatingly simple. There's always beauty in the ordinary. Look at what's already in front of you. Really look, not with passive eyes, but with the kind of active, curious, grateful attention that transforms a kitchen table into a masterpiece. Because here's what the research consistently shows. The single greatest predictor of a person's baseline happiness is not their income, not their health, not their relationship status, not their achievements. It's their capacity for appreciation, their ability to extract genuine pleasure and meaning from the life they're actually living, rather than the one they're imagining. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate, not resignation, not passivity, but an active, deliberate embrace of your life as it is, in this moment, in its fullness. Learn to see the chardin in your ordinary. That's rule number 1. I want to tell you about 2 very different kinds of people I've encountered in my life and research. On one side, I've met people of extraordinary wealth, people who have, by any conventional measure, won the material game of life, multiple homes, significant power, the ability to purchase virtually any experience or object they desire. I've met people worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and a handful worth considerably more. On the other side, I think about my grandmother-in-law. She spent 3 decades in retirement on a meager Social Security check. That was it. No investments, no savings to speak of, no financial cushion of any kind. By most statistical definitions, she was living near the poverty line. Her world was small in the geographic sense. A modest home, a small garden, a local library, and she was one of the most genuinely, radiantly, sustainably happy people I have ever met in my life. I don't say that to romanticize poverty. Financial stress is real. Economic insecurity causes genuine suffering. I'm not standing here telling you that money doesn't matter or that struggling is secretly beautiful. That would be dishonest and frankly disrespectful to people who are genuinely suffering under financial hardship. What I am telling you is that money, beyond a certain threshold of basic security and comfort, has a surprisingly weak relationship with happiness. This is one of the most replicated findings in all of positive psychology. The correlation between income and day-to-day emotional well-being flattens out well before most people imagine it would. And yet we keep chasing, we keep upgrading, we keep measuring ourselves against the next rung of the ladder. My grandmother-in-law wasn't happy despite having little. She was happy because she had reached a genuine, earned, deeply felt state of contentment with the life she had. She had found the thing that so many wealthy, successful, striving people never managed to find. She had stopped wanting more than she had. And I need you to understand, that is not a small thing. That is an enormous psychological achievement. In a culture that is specifically designed, through advertising, through social media, through the entire architecture of consumer capitalism, to prevent you from ever feeling satisfied, choosing contentment is a radical act. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus, who was born into slavery, who had literally nothing by material standards, taught that the path to freedom was not acquiring what you don't have, but releasing your desperate attachment to acquiring it. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, he wrote, but in having few wants. Few wants, not no wants. Not the elimination of ambition or preference or desire for a better life, but few wants, a curated, conscious, intentional set of desires, rather than the runaway, culturally programmed, comparison-driven hunger that most of us carry around without ever examining. The happiest people I know, across every income level, every background, every life circumstance, share this one characteristic. They have made peace with where they are, even as they may be working toward where they want to go. They are not trapped in a permanent state of emotional deferral, waiting to be happy until conditions improve. They chose happiness now, not as a performance, not as toxic positivity, but as a genuine, practiced, daily orientation toward the life they actually have. That's rule number 2. The happiest people aren't the wealthiest. They're the most content. Let me give you a simple framework that I think explains a lot about the psychology of desire and dissatisfaction. Think about the relationship between wanting something and having something. There are really 4 possible states you can be in at any given moment. The first state, you don't want something and you don't have it. A jet, a yacht, a mansion in Monaco. If you genuinely don't want these things, their absence doesn't register. They're just not part of your psychological landscape. You don't think about them. They don't cause you pain. The second state, you want something and you have it. This one's interesting, because you'd think this would be the happiness zone, and sometimes it is for a while. But what the research shows is that this state tends to be surprisingly brief. We adapt to what we have faster than we ever expect to. The new car stops being exciting. The house that felt like a dream becomes just a place where you live. The raise that was going to change everything quietly disappears into normal operating expenses. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. We achieve, we adapt, we desire more, we achieve again, we adapt again, round and round. The third state, you want something and you don't have it yet. This can actually be a useful state in the right doses. Anticipation has genuine psychological value. Working toward a goal you care about gives life structure and meaning. This is motivation, and motivation well directed is one of the most powerful forces for human flourishing. The fourth state, you want something and you can't have it. This is where the damage is done. This is the state that consumes people. When your desire consistently outpaces your ability to fulfill it, when you are perpetually focused on what's missing, what you haven't achieved, what everyone else has that you don't, this is one of the most corrosive psychological states a human being can inhabit. And here's the insidious thing. Modern life is specifically architected to put you in state 4 as often as possible. Your phone is a machine for generating desire. Every product ad, every lifestyle influencer, every algorithmically curated image of someone's highlight reel is a small, targeted mechanism for making you feel the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. The Stoics had a practice called negative visualization, and I want to be clear that this isn't about being pessimistic. It's actually one of the most counterintuitive happiness practices ever developed. The idea is simple. Instead of imagining everything you want to acquire, spend time imagining losing the things you already have. Imagine life without your health, without the people you love, without the basic comforts you currently enjoy. Not to dwell in fear or anxiety, but to break the adaptation, to restore your appreciation for what you already possess by temporarily imagining its absence. Because the opposite of desire isn't apathy. The opposite of wanting what you don't have is recognizing the value of what you do have. And that recognition, that genuine, visceral appreciation, is one of the most reliable pathways to contentment that psychology has ever identified. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of what you do not have, but count up the blessings you actually possess." This wasn't spiritual bypass. This was a cognitive strategy, an active reorientation of attention away from lack and toward abundance. The sooner you can look at your actual life, in its actual form, with all its imperfections and its limitations, and genuinely, honestly say, "This is enough," the sooner you will realize something remarkable. You've been rich the whole time. Not financially rich necessarily, but life rich. Rich in the things that actually matter. And the moment you recognize that, the desperate, exhausting chase loses its grip on you. That's rule number 3. The more you desire something you don't have, the more you're just focusing on the fact that you're not happy right now. I know what you're thinking right now, because I can anticipate the objection. I've heard it many times. Low expectations? That sounds like settling. That sounds like giving up. That sounds like the opposite of ambition. I want to push back on that, firmly and directly. There is a profound difference between low aspirations and low expectations. Aspirations are about the direction you're heading. Expectations are about what you demand the world deliver to you before you're willing to be content. These are not the same thing. You can have enormous burning aspirations for your life while simultaneously holding your expectations, your conditions for happiness, with a much lighter grip. In fact, I would argue that the most sustainably successful people do exactly this. They work hard, they aim high, they care deeply about their craft, and they have genuinely calibrated expectations that allow them to appreciate what they achieve rather than being perpetually disappointed by what they haven't yet reached. Here's the brutal truth. I have met, in the course of my research and my career, several billionaires, people who, by any rational measure, have achieved more material success than 99.9% of the human beings who have ever lived on this planet. Not a single one of them was as happy as my grandmother-in-law. And it wasn't hard to understand why. Her low expectations gave her a sense of contentment that became an enormous source of what I call psychological wealth, a concept I think is far more important than financial wealth and far more neglected. Psychological wealth is the richness of your inner life, your sense of meaning, your feeling of freedom, your capacity for joy, your resilience in adversity, your deep satisfaction with who you are and how you're living. It is the wealth that no market crash can touch and that no circumstance can permanently diminish. And the people with the most psychological wealth are almost never the people with the most financial wealth. They are the people who have done the difficult, unglamorous, deeply important work of aligning their expectations with their reality, not by lowering their sights for the future, but by releasing their emotional grip on the conditions they've attached to their own happiness. Seneca wrote, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." That rejoicing, that active, deliberate, practiced gratitude, is the engine of psychological wealth. And it costs nothing. It requires no particular income level. It is available to you right now, regardless of your circumstances, if you're willing to do the inner work to cultivate it. The billionaires I've met are, almost universally, prisoners of their own expectations. They have set their happiness bar at a level that is almost impossible to consistently clear, and so even when they achieve extraordinary things, the satisfaction is fleeting, quickly replaced by a new goal, a new comparison, a new gap to close. My grandmother-in-law set her happiness bar at Garden is Growing and Library has a new book, and she cleared it every single day. That is not poverty of ambition, that is genius. Rule number 4. Low expectations create psychological wealth. Actively cultivate low expectations, not for your dreams, but for the conditions of your contentment. Because the lower that bar, the more often life will clear it. And the more often life clears it, the richer you feel. Everything I've shared with you today, the Chardin paintings, the grandmother-in-law, the 4 states of desire, the concept of psychological wealth, it all flows into this final rule, this final insight. And it is, I believe, one of the most clarifying and liberating ideas I've ever encountered. All happiness, every version of it, in every culture, at every income level, across every philosophical tradition that has ever seriously engaged with the question, can ultimately be reduced to a single relationship, the gap between your expectations and your circumstances. All happiness in life is just the gap between expectations and circumstances. That's it. That's the whole formula. Deceptively simple, profoundly true. When your circumstances exceed your expectations, when reality delivers more than you anticipated, when life surprises you with its generosity, you feel happy, you feel grateful, you feel that particular lightness of being that we all spend our lives chasing. When your expectations exceed your circumstances, when what you have falls short of what you feel you deserve or require or were promised, you feel dissatisfied, frustrated, cheated even. That gap between what is and what you believe should be is the precise location where unhappiness lives. And here's what makes this framework so powerful, so actionable, so genuinely transformative. Most people try to close that gap by relentlessly raising their circumstances, by earning more, achieving more, acquiring more, experiencing more. And this works, temporarily. But the moment circumstances rise, expectations tend to rise with them. The gap reasserts itself. The dissatisfaction returns, wearing a more expensive outfit. The Stoics understood that there is a more effective, more reliable, more sustainable way to close the gap, by managing your expectations. Not by lowering your vision for your life, but by refusing to let your happiness be held hostage by conditions that haven't been met yet. Marcus Aurelius, who was the most powerful man in the known world, wrote in his Meditations, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself in your way of thinking." He wasn't saying this as someone who had never had anything. He was saying it as someone who had everything and who understood, through hard-won experience and rigorous philosophical practice, that having everything was no guarantee of feeling it. Now, and this is important, because I don't want to be misunderstood here, none of this is an argument for austerity. This is not a pitch for minimalism as an aesthetic, or a plea to live like a monk, or a rejection of comfort and beauty and pleasure. You can have the large house, you can drive the nice car, you can take the extraordinary vacation, you can enjoy the finest things available to you and be completely, genuinely, sustainably happy with all of it. If you have developed the capacity to appreciate what you have without making your contentment conditional on constantly having more. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it this way: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. You can desire things, you can work for things, but your peace, Your actual, lived, daily sense of well-being should not be a hostage to outcomes you cannot guarantee. The person who has everything but wants more is poorer in the ways that matter most than the person who has little but wants nothing else. How could it be any different? The first person lives in a permanent state of lack. The second lives in a permanent state of sufficiency. Happiness is not the presence of abundance. Happiness is the absence of wanting. It is the state when nothing, not one single thing, feels missing, and that state is available to you at almost any level of material circumstance, if you're willing to do the inner work to reach it. So let's bring it all together. 5 rules, 5 principles, not platitudes, genuinely hard, genuinely important, genuinely life-changing truths about what it means to be happy, drawn from psychology, from philosophy, from the real lives of real people I've had the privilege to observe and learn from. Rule 1, there is always beauty in the ordinary. Train your attention on what's already in front of you. The Chardin paintings are everywhere. You just have to learn to see them. Rule 2, the happiest people aren't the wealthiest. They're the most content. Contentment is not a consolation prize for people who couldn't achieve more. It is the ultimate achievement, the hardest one, the one that matters most. Rule 3, the more you desire something you don't have, the more you're just focusing on the fact that you're not happy right now. Break the addiction to desire by deliberately appreciating what already exists in your life. Interrupt the hedonic treadmill. Step off. Rule 4. Low expectations create psychological wealth, not low dreams, low conditions for happiness. The lower the bar for contentment, the more often life clears it. And clearing it, day after ordinary day, is what a rich life actually feels like. Rule 5. All happiness in life is just the gap between expectations and circumstances. Most people try to close that gap by inflating their circumstances. The wiser path is to manage your expectations, not by limiting your ambitions, but by refusing to tie your well-being to conditions you can't control. The Stoics spent centuries building a philosophical system around these exact ideas, and what's remarkable is that modern happiness science, with all its brain imaging and longitudinal studies, keeps arriving at the same destinations. You do not need more money to be happy. You may want money, you may work hard for it, you may use it well when you have it, but you do not need it the way you've been taught to believe you do. What you need is far simpler, far more accessible, entirely within your own power to cultivate. You need to learn to want what you have. That's all. That's the whole answer. Centuries of philosophy, decades of psychology, mountains of research, all pointing at the same small, profound, radical truth. Want what you have. That's where happiness lives. I hope something in this video was useful to you. If it was, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper on any of these ideas, drop a comment below. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you already have enough to be happy. The question is only whether you're willing to believe it.